Lyra stood at the edge of the spaceship, her eyes scanning the planet below. It was Earth, an ancient world that many alien species had feared, called the Deathworld by those who had dared to speak of it. For centuries, tales had circulated across the galaxy about its harsh environments, its vicious creatures, and the many who had entered and never returned. But Lyra wasn't like the others. She wasn't afraid. She had heard the stories, yes, but she didn't believe them. She was stronger than the planet, faster, smarter. She had faced threats far more dangerous than Earth's so-called beasts, and she had emerged victorious every time. The Galactic Council had underestimated Earth, too, betting that no one could survive its deadly environment. They had sent many before her, each one failing, leaving behind nothing but stories of terror. But Lyra was different. She was from a species that could adapt to any challenge, no matter how extreme. Earth's dangers wouldn't be a problem for her. She was sure of it. As the ship descended into the atmosphere, the landscape of Earth grew clearer. Thick forests stretched as far as the eye could see, vast deserts lay beyond, and towering mountain ranges seemed to pierce the sky. The air was thick with oxygen, and the scents were unfamiliar, strange, wild. She could almost feel the planet's heartbeat. Earth wasn't just another world. It was alive in a way that no other planet had ever been. Her ship landed softly, kicking up dust and debris as the metal door slowly opened. Lyra stepped out onto the soil of Earth, her boots sinking slightly into the soft ground. She took a deep breath, the air heavy and rich, different from the sterile environments of her home. She was standing on a planet that had terrified so many, but now it was her turn to conquer it. The first step felt like an invitation. The ground beneath her feet seemed to welcome her, but as she took another step, she felt something shift in the air. A low rumble, almost like a distant growl, vibrated through the Earth. Lyra paused. The planet was already warning her, but she wasn't about to back down. Ahead of her, the jungle seemed to stretch endlessly. Thick trees with enormous trunks and thick leaves that seemed to shimmer in the sunlight. It looked peaceful at first, but Lyra had learned long ago that appearances could be deceiving. She drew her weapon, a sleek silver blade, just in case. She was confident, but she knew better than to let her guard down completely. As she moved deeper into the jungle, the sounds around her grew louder, strange, eerie noises that echoed through the trees. Birds, or maybe they were something else, called out in high-pitched screeches. The ground seemed to move under her, as if the Earth itself was shifting and watching her every move. She paused, looking around, but saw nothing. Just the thick underbrush, the twisted vines, and towering trees. Suddenly, something moved in the corner of her vision. A shadow, swift and silent. Her instincts kicked in, and she spun, her blade at the ready. But nothing appeared. She held her breath, waiting for a sign, but there was nothing. She took another step forward, and the air felt heavier. The jungle seemed to close in around her, the trees bending as if to whisper secrets only they could understand. Lyra clenched her jaw. Earth wasn't going to scare her. She would survive, just like she had survived everything else. Then she heard it, a low, rumbling growl. Not the wind, not the trees. This was something living, something large. Lyra didn't hesitate. She darted behind a thick tree, pressing herself against its trunk, her heart beating loudly in her chest. Her senses were on high alert now. The growl came again, louder this time, followed by a strange scraping noise. It was close, too close. She carefully peered around the tree, her breath shallow. Her eyes narrowed as she saw the source of the noise. It was massive, at least 3 times her size. Covered in dark, matted fur, it had a muscular build that seemed capable of crushing anything in its path. Its eyes were wide, yellow, and hungry, scanning the ground for anything to hunt. Lyra's pulse quickened. She had encountered creatures like this before, but never on Earth. This was different. This creature wasn't afraid of her, and she had no idea how fast it could move or how strong it was. But she wasn't going to let it win. The beast sniffed the air, its head tilting slightly as if it had caught her scent. Lyra's fingers tightened around her blade, but she knew she couldn't make a move yet. The creature was still too far away. It might not have seen her, but it was certainly aware of her presence. Lyra's mind raced. She needed to think. There was no way she could outrun this thing, not in this dense jungle. She had to outsmart it. She took a deep breath and steadied herself. She had faced beasts far more terrifying than this, and she had outwitted them all. This creature would be no different. The beast took another step forward, its massive paws crushing the ground beneath it. Lyra slowly backed away, keeping herself hidden behind the tree. She didn't want to make a sound. She waited. Suddenly, the beast's head snapped in her direction. Its eyes locked on hers, and for a moment, time seemed to freeze. Lyra's heart skipped a beat, and a cold shiver ran down her spine. The creature had spotted her. There was no more hiding. Without warning, it charged. Lyra reacted instantly. She sprinted to the side, just narrowly avoiding the beast's first strike. The ground shook beneath her as it crashed into the tree she had been standing behind, snapping it in half with ease. She barely had time to register the force of its impact before she was on the move again, leaping over roots and branches, trying to put distance between herself and the creature. It was fast, too fast. Lyra could hear it behind her, its heavy paws pounding against the earth. The jungle seemed to blur as she pushed herself harder, faster. But just as she thought she might lose it, she heard something else, a sound different from the creature's growl. The air shifted, and in a split second, a massive shape barreled through the jungle, crashing into the beast with bone-crushing force. Lyra skidded to a stop, her eyes wide in shock. A larger creature had emerged from the shadows, something even bigger than the first predator. It was covered in thick scales, with jaws that could easily crush bone, and it let out a deafening roar as it grappled with the beast that had been chasing her. For a moment, Lyra stood frozen, watching as the two creatures fought, their massive forms tumbling through the underbrush. The sounds were terrifying. The clash of teeth and claws against each other echoed in the jungle. Lyra's mind raced. She needed to act. This was her chance to escape. She didn't wait to see who would win the battle. With the two beasts distracted, she darted between the trees, her breath coming in sharp gasps. The jungle was alive with chaos. She could hear the creatures behind her, but she couldn't afford to look back. Not now. Not when she had a chance to get away. Her heart pounded in her chest as she ran, faster than she ever had before. The Deathworld of Earth was unlike anything she had ever faced, and Lyra was beginning to realize that this challenge might be one she couldn't easily win. But she wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. The jungle closed in around her, and the battle raged behind her. But Lyra knew one thing for sure. Earth had just become the most dangerous place she had ever set foot on, and she had only just begun to scratch the surface. Lyra didn't stop running, not even for a moment. Her heart pounded in her chest, a constant drumbeat of fear and adrenaline. The jungle seemed endless, its thick canopy blotting out the sky, leaving her in near-complete darkness. The only light came from the occasional burst of energy that filtered through the leaves, casting shadows that danced like ghosts in her peripheral vision. She wasn't sure what had happened to the two creatures, the massive beasts that had fought over her, but she knew that her time to escape was running out. Her breath was shallow, each step harder than the last. The weight of the situation was starting to settle in her mind, and fear began to creep in, something she hadn't felt in a long time. She was facing something she didn't fully understand. Earth was a place like no other, a world so wild and untamed that it almost seemed to have a life of its own. As she continued to push forward, the sounds of the battle behind her began to fade. The crunching of branches, the growling, and the sound of heavy bodies crashing into the earth were distant now, but she didn't feel safe. She couldn't afford to let her guard down. The Deathworld was vast, and every corner seemed to hide a new nightmare. She stopped for a brief moment to catch her breath, her back pressed against the bark of a massive tree. Sweat streamed down her face, and her muscles burned from the exertion. Her weapon was still tightly gripped in her hand, but it felt too small against the raw power of the planet. Earth's creatures were unlike any she had ever encountered. This wasn't just a world of deadly predators. It was a world of chaos, where survival meant adapting at every turn. A low rustling from behind her pulled her attention away. Instantly, Lyra's senses flared. She whirled around, her hand gripping her blade tighter. Her eyes scanned the dense foliage, searching for any movement, but there was nothing. The air was thick with the sounds of distant wildlife, but no immediate threat. For a moment, Lyra's chest tightened in frustration. What was she doing here? She had come to prove a point, to show the galaxy that Earth's reputation as a death world was exaggerated. But now she wasn't so sure. Earth had a way of shaking even the most confident of beings, and Lyra wasn't immune to its power. She continued walking, her pace slower now, as she tried to regain her bearings. The jungle seemed to shift around her, the path ahead twisting and turning in ways that defied logic. She didn't recognize any of the plants or animals, and every instinct pulled her to turn back. But she couldn't. Not after everything. Not after everything she had faced before. Hours passed, or maybe it was days. Time felt strange on Earth. The sky had darkened, and the temperature had dropped. A cold wind had begun to stir through the jungle, the air now carrying an unfamiliar scent. Something had changed. Lyra's eyes narrowed. The shift in the atmosphere was subtle, but it was enough to make her instincts flare up once again. She crouched down, her back against the trunk of a tree, and listened. Her ears perked, trying to catch any sign of movement. Then, a faint growl broke the silence. Her breath caught in her throat. The creature was back. It was impossible to tell how close it was, but she knew one thing for sure. This time, she couldn't afford to underestimate it. Lyra wasn't foolish enough to think that the Deathworld's threats were limited to what she had already encountered. No, there was more. Earth was a place of constant danger, always shifting, always changing. The growl came again, louder now, closer. Lyra pressed herself tighter against the tree, her fingers gently caressing the handle of her blade. She could feel the adrenaline coursing through her veins, the battle between fight or flight beginning to take hold. Then, suddenly, the growl stopped. The silence that followed was unnerving. The hairs on the back of her neck stood on end. What was happening? Had it sensed her? Lyra's eyes darted around, scanning every inch of her surroundings, but the darkness of the jungle made it almost impossible to see anything. A thick fog had begun to roll in, swirling through the trees and obscuring her vision. She had been in situations like this before, where the line between danger and safety was blurred. But this was different. This wasn't some foreign planet with predictable patterns. Earth was wild, untamed, and the longer she stayed here, the more she realized how out of her depth she truly was. The growl sounded again, but this time it wasn't alone. There was something else, something deeper, something far more menacing. Lyra's eyes widened as she heard a rustling nearby. Her senses screamed at her to move, to run, but her legs were frozen. The mist thickened, and the growl became a deafening roar. Something massive emerged from the fog, its form barely visible through the haze. Lyra barely had time to react. The creature's eyes glowed with an eerie yellow light, and it was massive, bigger than the beast from before. Its claws were long, sharp, and its teeth gleamed in the dim light. But this wasn't just any predator. This was something more, something that Earth had birthed from its darkest corners. Lyra's mind raced, but she didn't hesitate. She lunged forward, rolling to the side as the creature's claws raked through the air where she had been standing. The ground shook as it roared in fury, and Lyra could feel the intensity of its power. It wasn't just strong, it was fast. Her heart hammered in her chest as she darted between the trees, the sound of the creature's pursuit getting closer. She had to think, had to act fast. There were no other options left. Earth's death world was real, and it was hunting her down with a vengeance. She ducked behind a large boulder, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Her eyes darted to the left and right, trying to find any escape route. The jungle was silent for a moment, the only sound the distant rustling of the leaves. Then, with a chilling growl, the creature appeared once more, its glowing eyes locked onto hers. This was no longer a challenge. It was a fight for survival. Lyra's hands tightened around her weapon. The jungle was no longer a test. It was a battlefield, and Earth was its unforgiving arena. Lyra's breath came in ragged bursts as she sprinted through the dense jungle, her pulse a deafening drum in her ears. Her boots sank deep into the muddy ground, and her body ached with each stride, but she couldn't afford to slow down. The beast, that monstrous creature, was still hot on her heels. She could hear its massive paws crushing the earth with every step, the ground vibrating beneath her feet. A strange, primal fear gripped her chest. Lyra wasn't a coward. She had faced the greatest challenges the galaxy had to offer. But this was different. This was Earth, the planet that had been known across the stars as a Deathworld, a world that didn't just breed monsters, but birthed them. Every tree, every shadow seemed to harbor an enemy. And Lyra knew deep down that even if she survived this, the jungle wouldn't let her leave unscathed. She pushed herself harder, darting between the towering trees, her muscles screaming for relief. The dense foliage blurred past her, the mist wrapping itself around her like a suffocating shroud. Lyra's mind raced, calculating her options. Her only chance of survival was to outsmart the creature, not outfight it. She had to find a way to make it lose her, to gain some distance. But the jungle was relentless, and there was nowhere to hide. Then she heard it, a soft crack from behind her, the sound of something large crashing through the undergrowth. The creature was closing in. She risked a glance over her shoulder, and her stomach dropped when she saw its massive form breaking through the trees, its glowing eyes locked onto hers with a deadly focus. There was no escaping it. Her hands trembled as she gripped her weapon, her thoughts a chaotic mess. There was no way she could outrun it, not in this terrain. She needed to think quickly, find an advantage. Her eyes scanned her surroundings, searching for something, anything, that could help. That's when she spotted it. A thick vine hung from a tree just ahead. It was far above the ground, but if she could reach it, she might be able to swing herself out of its reach. It was a long shot, but it was the only chance she had. Without wasting another moment, Lyra veered toward the vine, her hand reaching up to grab it. Her fingers brushed against the tough rope-like plant, and she gritted her teeth, swinging her weight up to grasp it fully. Her heart thudded painfully in her chest as she climbed with desperate speed, the beast's growl growing louder and closer. She didn't dare look back. The vine creaked under her weight as she pulled herself up, higher and higher. But the creature was relentless. She could feel the air grow colder, the atmosphere thick with danger, as it reached the base of the tree. Its enormous body heaved against the trunk, trying to claw its way up after her. Lyra pushed herself harder, every muscle straining as she climbed. Her fingertips were numb, and her arms burned with the effort, but she couldn't stop now. The vine was slippery, the jungle wet from the mist, but she kept her focus. She could hear the creature's roar, its frustration vibrating through the ground beneath her. She reached the top of the vine and quickly scrambled onto a branch, positioning herself on the tree. The growl below was a low, guttural sound of rage. She could hear the creature pacing beneath her, waiting for her to make a mistake. But she wasn't going to give it that chance. Lyra's mind raced as she crouched down on the branch, watching the beast below. It was circling the base of the tree now, its sharp eyes scanning every inch of the jungle. The creature was massive, easily 10 times the size of any predator she had encountered on other worlds. But it wasn't just its size that made it terrifying. It was its sheer intelligence. The beast was no mindless animal. It knew exactly what it was doing. Lyra held her breath, her heart pounding in her chest. If the creature decided to climb after her, she would be in trouble. There was no way she could outrun it on this terrain, and the vine wouldn't be much help for long. She had to keep her wits sharp, stay one step ahead. Minutes passed like hours, the tension in the air growing thicker with every second. The jungle was still. The only sounds were the soft rustling of leaves and the distant hum of creatures unknown. Then suddenly, the beast stopped circling. For a moment, Lyra thought it had given up, but her instincts screamed that something was wrong. The hairs on the back of her neck stood on end. She dared a glance down. The creature was no longer looking up at her. It had fixed its gaze on something else, something just beyond the trees. Lyra felt a chill run down her spine. Something wasn't right. The beast was still watching the shadows, its eyes locked onto whatever had caught its attention. But Lyra wasn't foolish enough to think that it would stop hunting her just because it was distracted. The jungle was filled with danger, and if anything, this new threat was just as deadly. Her heart raced as she silently shifted her weight on the branch, preparing herself to move at a moment's notice. She knew Earth was unpredictable. The longer she stayed, the more she realized how much of a mistake it had been to underestimate the planet. The creatures here weren't just monsters. They were forces of nature, as ancient and unpredictable as the jungle itself. If she didn't leave soon, she feared she might become just another of Earth's many victims. The rustling of leaves pulled her out of her thoughts, and Lyra's grip tightened on her weapon as she prepared for whatever came next. The world around her was alive with the sound of danger. The jungle was closing in, and there was nowhere to run. Lyra's eyes darted from shadow to shadow, her every muscle coiled with tension. The creature below her was still distracted, its head cocked as it listened intently to the new sounds in the jungle. But Lyra knew better than to assume that meant safety. She had spent enough time on Earth to understand that the moment you let your guard down here, the planet would remind you just how ruthless it could be. A sharp crack of a branch somewhere to her left made her freeze. The beast, still on the ground below, snapped its attention to the new noise, its glowing eyes narrowing. Lyra's breath caught in her throat. This wasn't good. Earth was a world of constant surprises, and she had learned the hard way that it didn't play by any rules she knew. From the corner of her eye, she saw movement. The underbrush parted, and a flash of fur and muscle leaped through the shadows. Another predator. This one was different. Smaller, faster, its lithe body moving with a grace that made Lyra's heart skip a beat. She hadn't seen anything like it before. The creature's eyes glowed a sickly green, its sleek form blending seamlessly into the shadows. It was like a phantom, a ghost of the jungle. Lyra felt the sudden urge to climb higher, but it was too late. The smaller predator wasn't interested in her. It was focused entirely on the massive beast below. Lyra watched, captivated, as the two creatures locked eyes. There was no sound for a brief, terrifying moment, just the silence that came with an impending battle. Then the smaller predator struck. With a speed that seemed impossible, it shot forward, sinking its claws deep into the larger creature's side. The beast roared in pain, thrashing wildly, trying to shake the smaller one off. But it was fast, darting in and out of reach, striking with lethal precision. It was clear this creature was a fighter, one that knew exactly where to strike and how to avoid retaliation. Lyra's mind raced. This wasn't just a random encounter. No, the creatures here were too intelligent, too strategic for that. She had been caught in the middle of something, and now she had a front-row seat to a battle she had no part in, but couldn't escape from. The ground below rumbled as the larger beast crashed through the underbrush, trying to shake off the smaller one. Its roar echoed through the jungle, shaking the very trees as it went. Lyra's grip tightened on the branch as she clung to it, her heart thundering in her chest. If she fell now, she'd be caught in the middle of this fight. She wasn't sure which creature would be the deadlier one, but either way, she was in their territory. The fight between the two predators was brutal, the sounds of flesh tearing and bones snapping filling the air. Lyra had no intention of sticking around to see the outcome. If the smaller predator won, It might turn its attention to her next. If the larger beast won, she'd be in its path again. Either way, it was a lose-lose situation. But she had no choice. The vine that had helped her earlier was too far now, and the tree branches were spaced too far apart to jump from one to another without risking a fall. Her only hope was to find a way to escape before the fight spilled in her direction. As the battle raged below, Lyra's thoughts raced. She had been in tough situations before, but nothing like this. Earth was a land of survival, where every living thing seemed to fight for dominance in a world that didn't care if you lived or died. It was a place that stripped away all pretensions of peace, leaving only the raw, untamed instinct to survive. A sudden roar shook her from her thoughts, and Lyra's eyes snapped back to the fight. The larger beast had managed to land a crushing blow to the smaller predator, sending it crashing into the jungle floor with a sickening thud. For a moment, it seemed like the battle was over. The larger creature stood over its fallen opponent, panting heavily, its claws stained with blood. But the smaller predator wasn't finished yet. With a final, desperate screech, it lashed out, sinking its teeth into the larger beast's throat. For a moment, everything was still. The jungle held its breath as the two creatures fought their final battle, the larger predator's roar growing fainter as the smaller one's attack proved fatal. Then, with one final convulsion, the larger beast fell to the ground, lifeless. Lyra's stomach churned as she watched the aftermath. The smaller predator stood victorious, its chest heaving as it surveyed the area. It was breathing heavily, but it didn't seem to care. Its glowing green eyes locked onto Lyra for a brief moment, and she felt the weight of its gaze like an electric current running through her. Then, as quickly as it had appeared, the creature vanished into the shadows, leaving Lyra alone once more. The jungle was silent now, the tension of the battle fading into the oppressive stillness. Lyra let out a long, shaky breath as she lowered herself from the tree branch, her hands trembling. The adrenaline was still coursing through her veins, making her feel lightheaded. She had narrowly escaped another brush with death, but it wasn't enough. She couldn't keep running forever. Earth's Deathworld was relentless. It would keep pushing her to her limits until she broke, or until she found a way to leave. But for now, there was no escape. The jungle was her only choice. She would have to keep moving, keep surviving, and hope that somehow she could make it out of this alive. If she didn't, Earth would claim her as one more of its countless victims. Lyra's heart was still racing from the battle she had just witnessed. The creature's glowing eyes, the ferocity of the fight. It had all been too much. She couldn't stay still for too long. Earth's Deathworld was like a living thing, always watching, always waiting for an opportunity to strike. The jungle wasn't a sanctuary. It was a trap, and she was just another prey. She took a slow, deliberate step forward, trying to shake off the unease in her chest. Her muscles were sore, her body ached from the run, but there was no time to rest. She needed to keep moving. Earth was a planet that demanded respect, and if you let your guard down even for a moment, it would remind you just how unforgiving it could be. The sounds of the jungle were slowly returning. The soft rustling of leaves, the chirping of insects, the calls of distant creatures. But there was an edge to it now, a tension that hadn't been there before. The jungle was alive with danger, but Lyra had no choice but to trust her instincts and move forward. She crouched low, keeping to the shadows as best as she could, her steps as quiet as possible. The battle had left a trail, a scar in the earth where the two predators had fought. There was no telling if other creatures had been drawn by the noise or the scent of blood. She needed to put distance between herself and the battlefield. Lyra's mind kept racing, trying to piece together what had just happened. She had encountered beasts before, but nothing like this. Nothing that fought with such primal intelligence. The creatures on Earth didn't follow any natural order. They were lawless, violent in a way that even the fiercest predators in the galaxy couldn't match. The creatures of Earth were survivors, and they fought with every ounce of their being. But what had really struck her was the fact that she wasn't the only outsider here. The jungle was home to these monsters, these Deathworld creatures, but it had also become her temporary home. She wasn't an alien here. She was part of the same struggle, trying to live another day, just like the creatures that roamed its surface. A crack in the underbrush snapped Lyra out of her thoughts. Her body tensed, her hand instinctively reaching for her weapon. She wasn't alone. From the shadows emerged another figure, an alien, though not one Lyra had seen before. Its skin was a deep shade of violet, with glowing lines running across its body. It moved with a grace that reminded her of the predators she had just escaped, its eyes scanning the area carefully, its steps deliberate. Lyra didn't know whether to approach or stay hidden. She wasn't sure if this alien was friend or foe, but the way it moved through the jungle suggested it had lived here for a long time, maybe longer than she had. The creature's sharp, angular features didn't resemble the peaceful beings she had encountered on other planets, but something about it suggested it was no mere predator. It was watching her, though not with the same hunger as the beasts she had already encountered. There was something more calculating in its gaze. Lyra held her breath. She didn't make a sound, but she had to act quickly. The alien was too close. It was only a matter of time before it spotted her, and she wasn't sure how to approach this. If it attacked, she would have no choice but to fight back. But if it was an ally, there was no reason to make a move too soon. The alien's eyes shifted, locking onto her with unnerving precision. For a moment, they simply stared at each other. Two strangers, two creatures from entirely different worlds caught in the web of Earth's untamed jungle. Then, to Lyra's surprise, the alien spoke. Its voice was deep, almost musical, and its words were unlike anything Lyra had ever heard before. "I can sense you," it said, though the language it spoke was incomprehensible. But the tone, the inflection, was clear enough. This creature wasn't here to hunt her. It wasn't an enemy. Lyra took a tentative step forward, slowly lowering her weapon. She was still cautious, but if this creature wasn't here to attack, maybe it was worth finding out more about it. Her mind raced as she considered the possibility that this alien might hold the key to surviving Earth's brutal trials. If it had been on this planet longer than her, it might know more about how to navigate the jungle, how to survive the predators. "Are you lost?" she asked, unsure if it would even understand her words. To her surprise, the alien tilted its head, a strange glimmer of recognition in its eyes. "Lost?" it echoed. Lyra nodded, though she wasn't entirely sure how to explain what she was asking. "You've been here for a while, right? You know this place. Can you help me?" The alien's expression softened, and for the briefest of moments, it almost seemed to smile. It didn't speak again, but it turned slightly, as if inviting her to follow. Without a second thought, Lyra moved toward it, though every part of her warned her to be cautious. But something about the alien's manner reassured her. It had been through the same thing, it seemed. It was a survivor, just like her. As they moved through the jungle together, the alien led the way, navigating the dense undergrowth with ease. Its steps were calculated, confident, and for the first time since landing on Earth, Lyra felt like she wasn't completely alone. She could still hear the distant growls of predators, the calls of creatures she couldn't see, but the alien moved through it all with the ease of one who had long since learned how to survive this dangerous world. The jungle seemed to open up before them, the heavy mist dissipating slightly as they moved deeper into the heart of Earth's wilderness. The air was thick, damp, but there was a strange beauty to the jungle now, a beauty that Lyra had missed in her frantic flight. This was Earth's way, she realized, a world where survival meant understanding it, not just surviving on the surface. Maybe she had underestimated it before. Maybe there was more to Earth than its savage reputation. The alien stopped suddenly, its head turning toward Lyra, its eyes scanning the horizon. Lyra followed its gaze, but she saw nothing. Whatever it sensed, it wasn't something visible to her. The creature's posture shifted, its body growing tense as it reached for something at its side. An energy blade, glowing faintly in the jungle's dim light. Lyra instinctively reached for her own weapon, her senses sharpened. She wasn't sure what was coming, but she knew that whatever it was, Earth's Deathworld was always ready to claim another life. The alien's movements had become guarded, its attention entirely focused on the unseen threat ahead. Lyra's breath caught in her throat. The silence in the jungle had deepened once again, and something was about to break it. The battle for survival was far from over. The silence was deafening as Lyra crouched low beside the alien, every muscle in her body tensed and ready for action. She could feel her pulse racing in her veins, a constant reminder that Earth's Deathworld did not forgive mistakes. It didn't wait for you to be prepared. It simply claimed what it wanted. And right now, it wanted something. The alien's gaze was locked on the thick underbrush ahead, its entire body rigid with alertness. Lyra's hand tightened around her weapon, her fingers itching to take action. The jungle, despite its beauty, was a killer. She knew that all too well. She had barely survived the creatures of this world once. She wasn't sure how much longer her luck would hold. Then the faintest movement, barely perceptible, caught her eye. A ripple in the tall grass, a shadow that didn't belong. Lyra's heart skipped a beat. She wasn't imagining it. Something was out there, watching, waiting. She glanced at the alien beside her. Its eyes flicked toward her for a brief moment, and there was an unspoken understanding between them. Whatever was out there, they were both ready to face it. Without warning, the alien sprang into action, its movements swift and fluid. It disappeared into the jungle, melting into the shadows like a predator of its own. Lyra didn't hesitate. She followed, her instincts pushing her forward. The jungle closed in around them as they ran, the sounds of their footsteps drowned out by the rustling of leaves and the distant roar of something far larger than either of them. Lyra could feel the weight of the jungle pressing against her, a constant reminder of how quickly things could go wrong. They moved quickly, navigating through the dense foliage with practiced ease. Lyra's senses were on high alert. Every crack of a branch, every movement in the underbrush sent a jolt of adrenaline through her body. The jungle was alive with danger, and whatever they were about to face, it was close. They reached a clearing, a small hidden valley that seemed to breathe with its own life. The air was thick and humid, the sunlight barely breaking through the canopy above. Lyra could feel the tension in the air, the anticipation building with every passing second. The alien stopped, its head turning sharply as it locked eyes with her. In that moment, Lyra knew something was coming, something big. Then, from the edge of the clearing, it emerged. At first, it was just a silhouette, a massive shape looming in the distance. But as it stepped into the light, Lyra's stomach dropped. It was a creature unlike any she had seen before, a towering beast covered in thick, matted fur that seemed to shimmer with an unnatural sheen. Its eyes glowed with a fierce, yellow intensity, and its teeth, sharp, jagged, and black, gleamed in the sunlight. Its massive frame seemed to block out the very light around it, casting a dark shadow over the clearing. It was a predator, pure and simple, a creature born of this world's violence, and it was now hunting them. Lyra instinctively took a step back, but the alien beside her stood firm, its weapon ready, its posture steady. The creature's eyes flicked between them, its nostrils flaring as it sniffed the air. It could smell them. It could sense their presence. Lyra's mind raced. She wasn't sure what this creature was, but one thing was certain. It wasn't going to let them leave this clearing alive. The creature took a slow step forward, its massive paw crashing into the earth with a force that shook the ground beneath them. Lyra's grip tightened on her weapon. She glanced at the alien, whose face remained impassive, but Lyra could sense the tension radiating off it. This wasn't just a fight. This was survival. The alien raised its weapon, an energy blade that hummed to life with a crackling blue light. Lyra felt the surge of energy, the crackle of electricity in the air. It was a weapon designed to kill, to cut through the toughest of opponents. But would it be enough? The creature growled, a deep, guttural sound that sent a chill down Lyra's spine. It moved again, its huge form closing the distance between them. Lyra felt her heart hammering in her chest as she took a step back, her eyes never leaving the monster in front of her. The alien acted first, charging toward the creature with speed and precision. The energy blade struck with a loud crack, but the creature was fast, too fast. It sidestepped the strike and swiped its massive claws at the alien. The claws tore through the air, their speed almost impossible to follow. The alien barely managed to duck, but the claws grazed its side, leaving a trail of blood in their wake. Lyra's stomach twisted as she watched the alien stumble back. The creature was relentless, its movements predatory, designed to overwhelm. It was too powerful, too fast for a direct fight. They couldn't beat it with strength alone. "Move," Lyra shouted, her voice cutting through the noise of the battle. She didn't wait for a response. She knew they needed to be smarter than this. Running into battle head-on was suicide. They had to outthink the creature, outmaneuver it. Lyra darted to the side, her mind working faster than her feet. The jungle was full of hidden dangers, but it was also full of opportunities. She needed to use the environment. She needed to outsmart this monster. The creature roared, its massive form turning toward her. Lyra didn't hesitate. She sprinted, weaving between trees and rocks, her eyes scanning for anything she could use to her advantage. The creature followed, its heavy footsteps thundering in pursuit. Lyra's heart raced as she spotted what she needed, a massive rock formation just ahead. If she could lead the creature into it, she might be able to trap it. She gritted her teeth, pushing herself harder. The creature was gaining on her, its breath hot and heavy on her back. She could hear the alien struggling behind her, but she couldn't look back. There was no time. As she reached the rock formation, she dove to the side, barely dodging the creature's claws. The beast roared in frustration as it barreled toward the rocks, but its size worked against it. It couldn't navigate the narrow pass as easily as Lyra could. The creature snarled as it struggled to maneuver, its claws scraping against the rock walls. Lyra's heart skipped a beat as she realized they might have a chance. She grabbed a large stone, hurling it toward the creature. It distracted it just long enough for the alien to strike. With a sharp, swift movement, the alien's energy blade sliced through the creature's side, sending it reeling back in pain. The creature roared again, but it was weakened, its movements slower, more sluggish. Lyra didn't wait to see what happened next. She charged toward the creature, her weapon raised. The alien was beside her, its energy blade crackling with power. Together, they were a force to be reckoned with. In that moment, they understood. Earth's Deathworld didn't care if you were alien or human, but it did care if you could survive. And Lyra wasn't ready to die today. Neither was the alien. With one final, coordinated strike, they'd brought the creature down, its massive body crashing to the ground with a heavy thud. Silence descended over the jungle once more. The jungle, it seemed, was holding its breath. But Lyra wasn't done. She knew there were more like it out there. And the battle for survival had only just begun. Lyra stood over the fallen creature, breathing heavily, her chest rising and falling with each ragged breath. The jungle, once alive with the sounds of battle, had gone eerily quiet, save for the faint rustle of leaves in the distance. The victory felt hollow, as though the universe itself was merely pausing before throwing the next challenge at them. But in this moment, she allowed herself a brief reprieve. The alien beside her, its face unreadable, hadn't moved, but it hadn't been harmed either. Its posture, though, showed signs of tension, as if it were expecting the next threat to appear at any moment. The creature's body lay still, the dark fur matted with blood. Its large, glowing eyes were now dim, its massive frame no longer a threat. But Lyra knew better than to assume this was over. In the Deathworld, victory over one beast often meant little in the grand scheme. It was only the first step in a battle that stretched beyond one fight. She wiped the sweat from her brow, glancing at the alien. "Is it done?" Her voice sounded foreign to her ears, strained and raw from the tension of battle. She was used to fighting for survival, but the stakes felt different this time. The alien didn't respond immediately. It simply studied the creature's remains, its expression as impassive as ever. Finally, it spoke in its low, guttural voice. "This is only the beginning." Lyra's heart sank. She had known that. There was always more. The Deathworld had no mercy. Every creature, every challenge, was a lesson in survival. "Are you sure we should stay here?" she asked, her eyes flicking around the jungle. There could be more. The alien's gaze drifted upward, scanning the sky. "They will come," it said flatly. "But this place, it is safer than the open terrain." She nodded, but a feeling of unease settled deep in her stomach. The jungle was full of dangers, many of which Lyra had yet to face. She had survived here once before, but that had been a different time. A different fight. "How much longer do you think we have before they find us?" she asked, glancing nervously over her shoulder. The alien's sharp eyes narrowed. "Hours, maybe minutes." Lyra tightened her grip on her weapon. It wasn't much, but it was all she had. "We need to make a plan." The alien turned to her, its gaze piercing. "We need to survive." That was all it said. Its words were simple, but Lyra understood the weight of them. Survival was all that mattered in the Deathworld, and everything else was secondary. They moved quickly, setting up a temporary camp near the remains of the fallen creature. The alien worked with efficiency, its hands moving with practiced ease as it crafted makeshift defenses. Lyra helped where she could, though she could tell the alien was accustomed to being the one in charge of such tasks. She didn't mind. She knew her role. She had survived this world once before, and she would do so again. But as night began to fall, a sense of foreboding crept into Lyra's bones. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting the jungle into a deep, impenetrable darkness. The noises of the jungle shifted, more ominous now, as if the entire world had come alive in the night, eager to test their resolve. The alien stood by the edge of the camp, its gaze fixed on the dense foliage ahead. Lyra joined it, her eyes scanning the shadows. "What's out there?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Death," the alien answered, its voice cold, devoid of emotion. "But we are not ready to meet it yet." The words sent a chill down her spine, but Lyra refused to show any fear. She couldn't afford to. Not here. Not in this place. She turned back to the camp and checked their meager supplies. Water was low, food even lower. They couldn't survive on scraps for long. They needed to move, and fast. But then, a noise cut through the night. A low, rumbling growl that made the hairs on the back of Lyra's neck stand on end. It came from all around them. Her heart skipped a beat. This wasn't a creature. This was something more. Something that didn't belong to the Deathworld. The alien tensed beside her, its weapon already in hand. "Prepare yourself," it warned. And then they came. The ground seemed to shake as massive shapes emerged from the shadows. More creatures, but these were unlike anything Lyra had ever seen. They were larger, faster, and far more terrifying. The first one to appear was a beast with glowing red eyes, its fur matted with dirt and blood. It let out a guttural roar before charging, its claws swiping through the air in a deadly arc. Lyra barely managed to dodge, rolling to the side just in time. Her pulse pounded in her ears as she regained her footing. The alien was already in motion, its energy blade flashing as it clashed with the creature. Sparks flew with each strike, but Lyra could see the alien was struggling. These new creatures weren't like the one they had killed earlier. They were smarter, faster, and far more relentless. Another creature lunged at her from the side. Lyra barely had time to react before it was upon her, its teeth snapping just inches from her face. She threw herself backward, her heart hammering in her chest, but the creature's claws caught her arm, dragging her across the ground. Pain erupted in her side, and for a moment, the world went blurry. But she couldn't afford to lose focus. She couldn't afford to die here. Not when there was so much at stake. With a growl, she swung her weapon in a wide arc, catching the creature across the face. It screeched in fury and staggered back, but it wasn't enough to stop it. Lyra scrambled to her feet, her head spinning, her vision blurred with pain. The creature was coming again, faster than before. But then the alien moved. It didn't hesitate. It didn't look back. With a single powerful strike, it cut the creature down in a blur of motion. The beast's body collapsed to the ground, its life snuffed out in an instant. But there were more, and they were closing in. Lyra and the alien fought side by side, their movements fluid as they dodged and struck, their weapons flashing in the darkness. The jungle roared with chaos around them, a symphony of violence. Lyra's breath was ragged, but she fought on. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about proving that she belonged here, that she could survive, no matter the odds. The creatures circled them, but Lyra wasn't afraid. She had faced this world before. She had fought its monsters, survived its traps, and with the alien at her side, she knew they had a chance. But the battle was far from over, and she had a feeling that this was only the beginning of a far greater fight.